Welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant, where I give my in-depth analysis of all the pay-per-views that I watched in the WWE Network. Today I'll be talking about the 2005 installment of New Year's Revolution. So kicking off the show is a World Tag Team Championship matchup with William Regal and Eugene defending their World Tag Team titles against Tyson Tomko and Christian. Pretty fun match for the most part. Got a lot more time than I thought it would, coming in at nearly 13 minutes. But William Regal and Eugene, I don't think they were uncle and nephew. I think that was Bischoff and Eugene. I don't know how William Regal kind of got stuck in all of this, but they made for a pretty fun team. And William Regal, you think back on his career as a really serious competitor, especially compared to his, 2008 run as Raw General Manager, where I became a wrestling fan, of course. But, back at this point in his career was a really fun-loving fan favorite along with Eugene. And, of course, the tag team was all about Eugene more than it was William Regal. But they still made for a pretty fun tag team, and I really enjoyed this matchup here against Tyson Tomko and Christian. And this is really when Christian and Tyson Tomko, mostly Christian, kind of started getting on the roll a little bit in his whole entourage, the Christian Coalition, and going into his WWE title shot against John Cena a couple of months later, getting drafted to SmackDown. 05, in my opinion, was the best year for Christian as a singles competitor. I don't even think he won any gold whatsoever. I don't think he won the IC title or the tag team titles. He definitely did it on this show. But in terms of breaking out into his own, it was definitely on this pay-per-view, or in this year of 2005, that Christian definitely came onto his own as a top heel in the company, especially both on Raw and SmackDown, or on Raw at least at the time. I mean, I know that may sound strange, and me saying that he's involved in the opening match on a pay-per-view in a World Tag Team title match with Eugene and William Regal, but, it was the little stuff like this that made me like him as a heel, and he was such a great heel. I love him as a fan favorite, too. But, just the little stuff like this that kind of made him as a great heel, as great of a heel as he was in 2005. But anyway, the match kind of was really weird towards the end. I don't know if this was real or not or whatever else. I never really did any research after it happened. But Eugene, I think, hurt his knee on one of the spots, or got hurt on one of the spots that he did, I think with Tomko, or it might have been Christian. I can't remember exactly. But bottom line, Eugene gets injured. They attend him in the ring. Christian and Tomko kind of have to make up for it. They're just doing some, they're randomly just improvising and hitting the leg and stuff like that. William Regal takes out Christian or vice versa, something like that. And Eugene kind of half-asses, rolls up Tomko. I think it was Tomko. I don't think it was Christian. I can't remember, like I said before, and I apologize. I watched this pay-per-view a couple of weeks ago. Half-ass rolls up one of the opponents and gets the win. And then he had to be attended out of there. So it really felt pretty random because it was out of character for Eugene. And Eugene was one of those characters. You knew that he was never going to get above a certain level in WWE. He was never going to be a mid-card champion, obviously never a world champion. But he was a very fun character. The guy had matches at SummerSlam against the likes of Triple H and fucking Kurt Angle. So obviously the guy was getting great reactions. He was very popular amongst the fans. So I was glad to see him get a tag team title run. But anyway, going back to what I was saying before, the injury kind of just randomly came out of nowhere. It really didn't play any part in the match whatsoever. The ending was very awkward. The people didn't really know how to react. And then afterwards, Eugene was kind of carried out of there by the officials and the referees and everyone else. So it was a very awkward ending to an otherwise fun matchup for the most part. Like I said before, I enjoyed the duo of Eugene and William Regal. And I'm surprised it didn't last a lot longer than they did. But fun matchup just with a very odd ending. So up next, we had the Women's Championship on the line with another injury occurring in this matchup, but it was Trish Stratus contending for the gold against Lita. Lita, I think, had just come back from her neck surgery. She had won the title back, as I talked about this. I don't think I reviewed, actually, the 04 Survivor Series. I can't remember exactly. Oh, no, this was the start of it, and I'll get to that in a second, actually. Okay, so I'm a little bit confused here. But Trish Stratus and Lita. Okay, so the beginning of this matchup, the build-up to this matchup, was when she was with Kane at the time, the whole Snitsky baby, and Kane and Snitsky faced off in the show. I'll get to that a little later on in the review. Trish Stratus was making fun of Lita for looking like she was pregnant. So that was the build up to this matchup. And the matchup itself was good, but it ended out of nowhere. It was only a 4-minute matchup. Lita got injured on something that she did. Trish Stratus quickly rolled her up, won the Women's Championship. So I don't know, because I know, like when Steve Austin broke his neck back in 98, I want to say, I think it was, he really obviously severely injured himself in that contest, but the outcome, it wasn't like it was a random matchup. It was, like an undercard matchup, nothing on the line. The Intercontinental Championship was on the line in that matchup, and it was mandatory that he walked out regardless of whether he was injured, regardless of whether he was shot or not. he had to walk out of there with that championship because that's a big deal. You don't necessarily have a championship change hands unless, the guy broke his neck and they still didn't do the title change. They probably took the title off him afterwards because Owen Hart was champion a shortly while after. So, even in that situation, and granted they didn't know what was wrong with Steve. I don't even know if the referee probably knew, but no one else did. So they didn't take the championship off him, and they needed to make sure that he won that match, no matter how bad that ending was, that roll up to Owen. And this was kind of a similar situation. That's why I begged the question. Trish Stratus still won the championship here, so that might have been the ending outcome regardless. But this is around the time that Trish and Lita main evented an episode of Raw where Lita won that women's championship from Trish. So I just thought it was a little random, regardless of whether she was injured, and she was injured, regardless of whether the injury happened or not. Trish still would have walked out of here as the women's champion. So I don't know if that was planned or whatever else. I don't think the injury was planned because obviously Lita would really hurt her neck here or whatever it was, and she'd be out for close to a year. And I think she came back in time, or she was away for the Survivor Series in 2005, and she came back. Oh, no, wait, I don't even fucking know. This was after the neck surgery. I'm getting my timeline all mixed up here, but bottom line was that Lita had to miss some in-ring time. She was gone for a while because I know she was off WrestleMania because I talked about that in my WrestleMania 21 review earlier this year. I'm getting all mixed up here. I apologize. But still, though, they would resume that feud when they came back, and they would also cross paths at the New Year's Revolution the following year. I'll get to my review of the 2006 installment. I apologize for confusing you all. Bottom line, though, fun match while it lasted. Went all of 4 minutes, though. Obviously, had to be cut short due to Lita's actual injury. Trish walked out as the women's champion, would hold that championship. Much to my surprise, I didn't find this out until doing some post-match research afterwards, after I watched the show, that she would hold on to this championship until dropping it to Mickie James at WrestleMania 22. Not a few months later, but a year and a few months later. So I thought that was insane. So does that not make Trish the longest reigning women's champion of modern history, like CM Punk is the longest reigning WWE champion in the modern era? Isn't Trish technically the longest reigning women's champion in the modern era, aside from the fabulous Moolah? And I know the Divas Championship and the Women's Championship are two different things, two different lineages. I realize that. I understand that. So it's a little different. But anyway, I would have liked a better match, a longer match from these two, but obviously Lita's injury kind of got in the way of that. So 2 consecutive injuries in a row here, so that was a little weird. Kind of very scary for the first portion of this show. But, of course, they would resume that feud about a year later, and their respective departures from the company. Trish left in September of 2006. Lita was gone a short while afterwards. But this is women's wrestling. I know it's better from what... this was like a happy medium. It was better than what we saw in, like the early 2000s with the Attitude Era. I'm not complaining. Like I said before in all my other videos, sure, it's great to see a woman stripping on WWE TV, and their boobs are hanging out, all that other stuff. It's great. Of course, it's entertaining for the male viewers. That's awesome. It's all fun and all, but and then you fast forward to now. I mean, there's more wrestling, of course. I like today's product with the women and them treating them actually, respectfully, as opposed to back then. But we don't get wrestling. The matches last all of 2-3 minutes. So this was a happy medium in that there wasn't, any sexy stuff, and there was, of course, around 2005, 2006. But they weren't pushing the limit too much to the point where it wasn't about the in-ring action. It absolutely was. These two main events in episode of Raw, where Lita walked out as the new women's champion. So it definitely was about that around this point in time. They had a story behind the feud, and it's crazy that these two feuded as many times as they did in the early 2000s and in the mid 2000s, right up until they both left the company in 2006. That this feud never got old. Them holding that women's championship never got old. And a case can be made that when both did eventually retire from the company in 2006, that was when the women's division kind of died. Mickie James, took the ball and she ran with it for the rest of the time that she was with the company up until 2010. But aside from Mickie James, there weren't many women's wrestlers in the last 8 years that have really stood out. Aside from, I know there's the AJ Lees and Paige is just kind of getting started. Maurice, I love Maurice. She wasn't really a standout player that you'll remember for her in-ring wrestling skills, 10 years from now. And there was, of course, also, who am I thinking of here? Mickie James. Gail Kim didn't really have much of an impact. I mean, she was a great wrestler and all, but she never was really used to her full potential. Eve Torres, of course, is who I'm thinking of. Eve, AJ, Mickie, some of the greatest women's wrestlers, but none of them have ever had that same feel that Trish and Lita did back in 2006 and the 2000s, whatever. So, back to the bottom line here, back to the matchup. Good match, weird ending, new women's champion crown. Enjoyed it for what it was. But I always love the women's, feuds and stuff like that. And, of course, this was the greatest women's feud of all time, in my opinion. So up next, we have the Intercontinental Championship on the line with Shelton Benjamin defending against Maven. Maven, of course, the winner of Tough Enough. I didn't really know much about Maven. Of course, I've heard the name before. I know who he is, but, in going back and watching old pay-per-view matches on the WWE Network, I had never really seen much of his work up until this point. And this was after he turned heel. And he, for a great heel, it was really funny, because he would eventually get released for whatever reason. They never did anything with him. I don't think he ever won a championship in WWE. But before this matchup, he got a great heel promo on the crowd, and this show was taking place in Puerto Rico, so he was making fun, he was making stereotypical jokes and stuff like that, saying, like, speak English. Of course, that would never fly today, with a PG product and very sensitive society that we live in today, but I don't know, he got a lot of great heat from the live crowd on this show. The match went 6 minutes, but it wasn't a match whatsoever. Maven was just kind of walking around the ring, cutting a promo, going out of the ring, There was never really in-ring action whatsoever, because Shelton Benjamin just randomly hit his finisher out of nowhere, got the 1-2-3, and the match was over, still the Intercontinental Champion. So that really wasn't much of a matchup. And then Maven would demand a rematch, and he got that rematch, and the match lasted all of 5 seconds. I thought it lasted a little longer, lasted a little shorter than that. It says here on the wiki page that it was 5 seconds. It seemed like, to me, it was like 3 or 4, but I don't know, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. But Shelton Benjamin would win again, obviously not doing Maven many favors. I think he could have been more than what he was in WWE. Again, I'm speaking ignorantly here because I haven't seen much of his work, but what I saw on this show, the guy made a great heel, and he definitely ran with the heat that he was getting, and they never really did anything. I'm not going to say that he was buried here, but in a way he kind of was. He lost 2 matches consecutively, 1 in 5 seconds, lost one match in 5 seconds, not 1 in 5 seconds, if you know what I mean, not a merger victorious in 5 seconds. That was Shelton Benjamin. So, yeah, I thought the guy was a very good heel here. He got a lot of great heat from the Puerto Rican crowd, from the live crowd, but they never really did anything. Like I said before, they was kind of released, I think, probably in 2006. He was gone from the company a short while afterwards, which is a shame because I think the guy really made the most of any role that he was involved in, as opposed to being, a faceless fan favorite after winning Tough Enough, in which he was for a while. They actually did something with him as a heel, but again, never won any championship gold. So that was what it was, kind of a fun angle, but didn't do any favors for Maven, and not really surprising since he was gone from the company a short while later. Or no, this was in 2006, this is 2005. I'm mixing this up with the 06 installment. I apologize if I confused anyone up to this point. So up next, we had Muhammad Hassan against Jerry Lawler. I'm not going to get into the whole Muhammad Hassan thing and my thoughts on the gimmick. I've talked about it before. They really fucked the guy over. My theory was that they should not have released the guy at all. They probably got so much bad publicity from the whole stunt a couple of years later, or a couple of months later. They had to let him go instead of moving him to Raw, because I know he was banned from UPN television, whatever. I talked about this in my 2005 Great American Bash review. If you want to go back and check it out here on the channel, cheap plug. But, yeah, so this was right around the time that Hassan was getting his start in WWE, and he got a lot of good heat here, not too great, but the match definitely should not have gone as long as it did at 10 minutes, and he shouldn't have needed to cheat with the help of Daivari in order to beat Jerry Lawler of all fucking people. Like, his build-up was very good, so this was just kind of a small blemish, but I think this was his first matchup, and it kicked off the new year, it kicked off his career on a high note for the most part. But, like I said before, the match did not need to go 10 minutes of all things, and he did not need to cheat to beat Jerry Lawler. But aside from that, it was a nice first matchup for Muhammad Hassan. I thought the guy had a lot of untapped potential. Like I said before, I'm not going to get into the whole thing here, but a nice first debut matchup for Hassan. Up next, Kane and Snitsky, 11-minute matchup. So the time constraints on these matches are really weird. Like, the IC title match should have gone longer. These should not have been as long as they were. Kane and Snitsky had a pretty decent feud. I think I talked about it in my Taboo Tuesday review of 2004. So that Kane had just come back from filming. I think it was filming See No Evil, I think it was See No Evil. I can't remember. But yeah, he came back from his hiatus, feud with Snitsky again. This kind of put that feud to an end by defeating Snitsky here. A decent matchup. Wasn't like a great matchup or anything, but it was as good of a match as a Kane-Snitsky match could be, Snitsky was never the greatest in-ring worker, but he got a nice push right off the gate in this whole Kane feud, and I'm surprised they didn't really do much with him after this. I mean, he was with the company for another 2 or 3.5 more years after this, and he never won the championship gold. He teamed with Umaga for a while. He was on ECW. They just never did anything with the guy, which is surprising to me, considering how memorable, for better or for worse, this angle with Kane was. So that was that. And we get to the main event, an Elimination Chamber match for the vacant World Heavyweight Championship. I think it was a triple threat with H, Benoit, and I think Edge, were Benoit and Edge pinned / submitted to each other at the same time, thus vacating the World Heavyweight Championship, as they touched upon in the pre-match video package. I don't know if this was the third or fourth Elimination Chamber match in history, because they obviously had one at O2 Survivor Series, which I thought was amazing. They had one at SummerSlam 2003. I don't know if they had one in 04, but they obviously this was a few times after the match's inception in 2002. Pretty good matchup. I mean, this entire pay-per-view, this entire matchup, basically this entire show was centered around Batista. The guy was on the promotional poster. They did a lot of backstage segments leading into this matchup, teasing that Orton was a fan favorite at the time, obviously, after breaking away from Evolution. That he was trying to plant in Batista's head that Triple H doesn't need you, he doesn't like you, he's just using you to get the World Heavyweight Championship for himself, turn on him as soon as possible. Triple H and Batista would consult with each other a little later on in the night, and saying Batista was telling him what Orton told him, and Triple H was like, don't believe that bullshitter, you're going to help me win that World Heavyweight Championship. Batista says, but if you're eliminated first, you're eliminated before I can even get out there, I'm taking that World Heavyweight title. So a lot of foreshadowing for Batista, and eventually becoming that World Heavyweight Champion. It was obvious from the get-go the direction they were going in with Batista and Triple H going into WrestleMania, but that didn't make it any less great in my opinion. Simple, solid storytelling with these two, and it would continue for the next 2-3 months, which I thought was great. But yeah, Batista was pretty much the star of this matchup. I think he eliminated Jericho and maybe Benoit or Edge. I think Edge was like one of the first ones taken out. I think he might have been the first one taken out. Shawn Michaels was a special guest referee. Those two were feuding at the time. Edge was getting a nice rub from that feud before he would go on to win the Money in the Bank ladder match into the WrestleMania 21 event. So Batista taking out two wrestlers. It came down to Triple H, Batista, and Orton. Orton would eventually eliminate Batista. Batista was kind of, crossing the line in terms of, like, he was getting cheered by the crowd, but he was also getting booed too. He was still technically a heel. But there was a very cool moment that came in this matchup when Batista and Triple H came head-to-head after everyone else was taken out. Triple H and Batista come face-to-face, and they have this really cool confrontation before, I think, Benoit and Jericho take him out. But they were teasing that they were going to finally go at it, and of course, this is the kind of thing that we need more of in WWE, where they plant the seeds and people always bitch, moan, and complain about it being too predictable. I do too sometimes, but if it makes the most sense and it's a good story, why bother complaining? This was another one of those kind of events. And so yeah, I thought this was a great matchup. Triple H ended up coming out victorious by pinning Randy Orton with not one but two pedigrees, making him bleed, I think it was. I think Batista and Triple H systematically took him out. Orton got a huge rub from being one of the last guys in the chamber, taking out Batista, who was pretty much invincible up to that point. And Triple H came out victorious as the new World Heavyweight Champion. So one thing I didn't really understand was that why bother stripping of the World Heavyweight Championship in the first place if you're going to give it back to him? I thought that was a little weird. If the end game was always the same, then you can always have him enter the chamber as the World Heavyweight Champion and come out victorious. So I didn't really understand what the point of that was. Maybe they wanted to switch it up a little bit or justify the positions of Benoit, Jericho, and Edge being in this matchup. I'm not really sure what they were trying to do there, but still, I thought it was a very, very good matchup. Not the best chamber match I've ever seen, but it was kind of more so about the story, the solid storytelling that they were telling in this contest, as opposed to the in-ring action. The in-ring action was good. It was an all-star elimination chamber. We had Triple H, Batista, and Orton, 3 current/former members of Evolution, in addition to the 3 Canadians, Edge, Benoit, and Jericho, all great athletes in their own right. So I thought it was an entertaining chamber and a good way of closing off the show. On the whole, I thought this was a good show. Not a must-see pay-per-view. We had a new Women's Champion crown, new World Heavyweight Champion crown. I wouldn't recommend that you go out of your way to watch the show. I wouldn't call it a great show, but it had its moments, though. If there's one match from the show that you should go out of your way to see, it's absolutely the Elimination Chamber. Everything else was decent to good. The women's angle I thought was good, even though the match was a bit short and disappointing, but again, I can't really fault them for that. Lita got injured, so they had to make do with what they had. Again, the World Tag Team title match was fun for what it was, kicking off the show. The Eugene injury was a bit weird. The IC title stuff was, fun, if only for Maven's pre-match promo and all the heel stuff that he was doing. Hassan made his debut, or an in-ring debut on this show, so it was historic in that sense. Kane and Snitsky, decent yet forgettable matchup. Like I said before, this pay-per-view was all about the Elimination Chamber. There was a lot of backstage segments leading into it, so a lot of cool stuff. So watch the show, if only for that match, but I would not give the show a thumbs down. I would give it in the middle, if not a good rating. I enjoyed the show for what it was. I enjoyed this period, and I enjoyed this time period in WWE anyway. I like the Ruthless Aggression era. This kind of tied into that, so. And on that note, thanks for watching, folks. Always appreciate it. My next video is going to be covering the 2006 installment of New Year's Revolution. Next video after that, the 2007 installment. Before we go into 2015, I'll be talking all about the Royal Rumble for the entire month of January. Really looking forward to it. So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. All support is greatly appreciated. Have a very happy New Year, folks, and I'll catch you guys in my next video.